Brace yourself, heroes. From project lead Apostle Ostolov and the talented community of DMs, we discuss Grit and Glory. For decades now, running realistic campaigns using the world's greatest role-playing system has been a near impossible feat. Previous edition showered players with supernatural abilities and magic items until only Monsters of Legend really presented a formidable challenge.
Today we discuss Grit and Glory, an advanced player's guide to low fantasy and expanded combat, equipment, attrition, and recovery rules that focus on gritty gameplay.
Yes, well...
Hello and welcome, heroes, to the Grit Academy.
I am your host, Justin.
I'm your co-host, Ian.
Yeah, I'm your co-host, Brandon. That's me. Yeah,
that is you.
We hope to inspire you with creative content that you can bring with you on your next D&D adventure.
We are so excited to have you guys join us today. This is something that has been something I've put off covering because it's not everyone's bag, but there's enough goodies here that every DM will pull something from it. I truly believe that.
Now, D&D 5th edition is a welcome break from tradition. It has the bounded accuracy, a decent power curve, and flexible core rules that only need a few minor tweaks here and there for campaigns where players struggle to survive and face the unexpected consequences of combat.
Unexpected, huh?
Yeah.
Grit and Glory is your advanced player's guide to low fantasy and historic role-playing. This book contains popular house rules and expanded combat, equipment, attrition, and recovery rules that focus on realism and lethality.
Yes. What's really cool about this, Grit and Glory is intended for campaigns where players and opponents are made using similar rules. A perfect example of these rules do best are human-centric and low magic worlds such as Game of Thrones and Conan the Barbarian. While these rules support traditional dungeon delving, most monsters that scale far beyond the human capabilities are often dreadful encounters that make or break your players. Break. If you are looking for survival and horror fantasy like a Dark Souls or a Cthulhu mythos, you can challenge your players with uncompromising difficulty and attrition.
Yes, these rules may appear overwhelming at first, but all the rules are modular and can be introduced one by one into your game. So you slowly bring them into it, kind of thing. Start with those that empower your players, such as combat options and realistic equipment. And slowly raise the stakes by bringing new recovery and wounds mechanics to your game. Wounds and recovery mechanics are best suited for campaigns starting at level 3 to 5.
Yep.
And can be very lethal at lower levels.
No, I actually want steak. New York strip, ideally. Join us as we delve into this fantastic, and most importantly, free product.
Yes.
Borg.
So, here is this fantastic look. First, I just want to say that the team that's behind Grit and Glory is surprisingly well-versed in the mechanics of D&D 5th edition. You can see here that the team consists of a lot of variety of contributors, many of which are absolutely phenomenal content creators. So if you haven't checked out GM Binder, this was created on the GM Binder platform, where you can access a plethora of homebrew content. Now, we typically don't cover stuff from GM Binder just because there's oftentimes a lot of imbalance issues and inexperience, basically. But this was one of the products that really made it into our eyes, and we wanted to cover it because, honestly, I don't know anything else, but I love Dark Souls, and I love a really good challenge in my games. What about you guys?
I mean, as long as I'm ready for it and have the mindset, I'm ready to go.
Dark Souls has pissed me off to no end.
How many controllers have you lost?
None.
None?
None, because when I get to that point, I'm just...
So there are a lot of different core rules that go into making sure that this content is challenging. With that, that means there's a lot of variation on the more common rules. What? Oh. Such as exceptional success, This to me was very, very interesting. If you beat an AC or a skill challenge by 10 or more, it's considered an exceptional success. And it basically, for weapon attacks, it allows you to roll an additional weapon die before calculating damage. You can choose between the results. So basically, even on a non-crit, you get the opportunity to re-roll dice, which means you might be able to get a higher number and thus more damage. So that was something that was interesting to me because it's already, at least in 5th edition, typically hard to get over a 5 over the target. But that depends on the monster too, right? Some monsters have lower AC no matter what time you toss them. Before I get into more of these, was there anything that really stood out to you guys as you were kind of going through this? Or is there anything you're expecting to see in here that really just says this is hardcore? I love hardcore.
Well, just looking at the index alone,
Yes.
They also have some changes to the rules that are already there, which is fine. But they also have wounds, injuries, perils of combat, attrition and death, resting and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And
I really want the resting and recovery, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that one.
of course, what jumps out to me too is realistic weapons and armor. So.
And they try to go for a very historic, I guess, direction with these, which was pretty interesting. And they also made some slight changes to helping others. So when you use the help action to aid a character in a task, you must have proficiency in that skill. This to me is fantastic.
And that makes sense.
Because it always bothered me when the wizard is trying to decrypt complex glyphs and the barbarian rolls an 18. And I'm like, shit, because, you take the higher, right? In granting advantage. To me, he would more be in the way than he would actually be helpful. So this is a rule I really liked.
What's that one say? This? What's that one say? Door? What's that one say? Is? What's that one say? Booby trapped? Hey! This says this door is booby trapped.
The other thing that I really like about this, so we're gonna kind of just go through that, and you can look at this as we do. We'll touch on some things more than others, but here it talks about special contacts, which is a way to create a interesting NPC, I guess. It's a variation, but to me, this wasn't exactly something that really felt like it was necessary. But I don't know how you guys feel about it. But it basically gives you a way to generate them, right? They also did something different with inspiration points. The party can now earn up to 3 inspiration points instead of, just 1.
1 per session.
Yeah.
Is what it usually is.
Yeah. So, no, well, it's 1 at a time, and you can't get more than that. The party earns inspiration points at the end of the session, and it gives you a detailed breakdown for examples. I think this is something that the 5th edition handbook really fell flat on. So this kind of gives you some pointers. But in addition to that, it allows variant uses. It's no longer just inspiration grants advantage. What do you think about some of those options that the party can use inspiration points for there? Does any one of those jump out of you?
Points at the end of the session.
Okay, I kind of look at what Garwin said.
What's that?
I like to mention that the reason that Barbarian can help the wizard is because he forces the wizard to explain things slowly, resulting in the wizard paying more attention to what he's doing.
There you go. I like that.
That is kind of funny, actually.
I like a lot of those, actually.
Anyone in particular? Because the initiative increase by 10 for 1 combat is a fantastic use of inspiration, if you ask me.
Ooh, remove when failed death save or injury token.
Yeah.
Failed death save.
We'll get to talk about injury tokens later, too, which I really like. So, some good stuff here.
Reroll a damage roll rolled by a player
Or the DM. Yes, I really like that.
The DM rolls really high. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Remember, I told you, while we're going to be talking hardcore, there's a lot of good little homebrew rules in here that I think are enhance the play of the game of D&D. So balanced initiative. This is something that I thought was interesting. Combat starts. Every participant makes a dexterity check to determine their place in initiative. However, if the result in the die is equal or lower than the intelligence modifier, the participant may re-roll the d20 once, but must take the new result even if it's lower. So this to me is interesting. I would have expected them to change it to wisdom. because keeping an eye out and being self-aware of what's going on, that to me makes more sense. What do you think about the intelligence? The reroll mechanic's cool though.
Yeah, the intelligence is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because that's definitely not the first thing that came to mind for me. And I'm with you, too. I can definitely see more wisdom in that one, but hey.
That's what I was saying. It's like, isn't perception based on wisdom?
Yeah.
Yes. So, like I said, I don't know their
It's actually worth
ruling
noting that in second edition for Pathfinder, the initiative is actually based off your perception score.
Yes.
And there's a few other options, too, mind you, but that's the main one.
And some homebrews allow that where you do your dex and perception, which is, or one or the other. So they give some other stuff that's pretty interesting. Some variant rules on ready in action, ready in action. They call it expanded ready to action right here, which basically the normal rule is once you declare a ready to action under a specific condition, they kind of do away with that. You can make split-second statements and say, before something happens, I will do this if you've readied your action. I like this because it basically says you're less likely to waste your action, your readied action, which I thought was pretty cool. So this... Go ahead.
Actually, talk about initiative. It made me flashback to, if I recall correctly, I could be wrong, mind you, but like I think in the advanced D&D, the way initiative worked is technically on paper, all the actions, in theory, actually occur at the same time. So how that would work, in theory, for example, is let's say you hit let's say, like, you go down the initiative order as normal, you hit the kobold, you do killing damage to the kobold, and it kills him, but the kobold still gets his turn to attack, and then drops dead at the end of the initiative.
Oh, I like that. What is that in?
That's one of the earlier editions of D&D.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That's almost like they get a last stand sort of thing. That's pretty cool.
Well, no, the idea is everybody's acting at once. Yeah. Is why, so.
That is really cool. I like that. So the one thing that really stood out to me is they touch on the fact of wounds and that Dungeons & Dragons representation of the loss of hit points obscures the truth of a painful blow and suffering and death. Now, I think this is specifically because some people treat hit points as meat points, and that's not the case. In the player's handbook specifically calls this out. But if you do treat them as meat points, then of course it's not going to make sense. And
I've had so many dumb arguments occur with this.
But they decided that we needed a wounds threshold, which I think is really cool. Should a character ever take damage greater than their quote-unquote wound threshold, they suffer what's called wound risk. And this adds a variety of different effects, such as bleeding, which I think is really, really good. Now, if anybody reads the Kobold Press material, they have a lot of bleed mechanics in their stuff already. So this one just kind of takes that and applies it to a threshold, kind of like you have to do a certain number of damage before you get this bonus effect. But what's interesting is they stack. What?
Nothing.
Yeah, I don't know why it's falling. They stack, so you can get multiple tokens of bleed, and it stacks on top, which is terrifying when you think about it. Because if you got 5 little goblins and they all inflict a wound on you,
that's 5 points every round.
Well, yeah, it's more than that. It depends on the weapon dice. The bleeding out depends on the weapon used. So, and there's a lot of good stuff. If you're interested in this, please head on over to critacademy.com and check out our blog. We got a link right to this on the GM binder. Beyond that, they talk about injuries. Now, injuries is kind of in 5th edition, and the DMG is an optional rule.
And that's something I do touch on in chat, too, is there are some more gritty rules that are mentioned as optional rules in the DMG, but as you can see here with that Grit and Glory, that's hardly the only option, though.
Yes, and that's what I think makes it interesting, right? So they have what's called severities, right? And different, it's based on the number of injury tokens you have, which occurs from falling unconscious, which I love. The idea of being punishment for just falling unconscious punishes the person who acts recklessly.
Yep.
What?
No, yeah, because you've knocked me out before, and I've been poked by soul needles.
So what's cool about this is, they got a little table and you roll 46 and it tells you whether it's a minor or a medium, which means affecting saving throws or even affecting the damage. that the attack does. So the more severity the token, or the more severity of the tokens you have, the easier it is to be more severely punished when you're struck, which I think is very intriguing. What do you guys think of the idea of having a stacking severity where the regular attack that hits you now has additional effects, like breaking concentration and forcing con saves and increasing damage?
I think it's going to make players think twice before doing certain actions.
Yes. Well, and I think that's part of it, right? But what's really cool is they do touch on another option called overcoming pain. So if you are being struck and damaged, you can actually roll to kind of withstand the damage and potentially not get the token. I think this is cool because very rarely is Constitution come into play. You know, you have a few spells that affect it, but for the most part, it doesn't do a whole hell of a lot. So this really gives you a reason to want to toss points into Constitution more than just hit points, right? And obviously, there's a lot through this, so we're not going to be able to cover everything. But once again, this is just a fantastic addition to any DM's toolkit, even if you only pick or choose one or two things. Brandon, what do you think about this? Can you tell them about this Perils of Combat section?
Perils of Combat. These optional rules are the last step towards extreme realism and lethality in combat. Introduce them only to players in campaigns where a victorious fighter could still succumb to bleeding out or untreated wounds. Let's see, they got some options here. They got realistic bleeding. Bleeding out of combat. Oh, that would suck. It's like, we won!
Stop.
I'm still gonna die.
And this is something that I've done before. I've leveraged loss of hit dice, right, as a form of out of combat, hit point loss.
That hurts.
Yeah, I'm a dick.
That really hurts inside.
I like the festering wound because it's if it's not taken care of, it slowly begins to affect not only your ability to gain long rests, but also it reduces your maximum hit point size by a hit die value, which is terrifying as a player. To me, that's super intriguing and a really well thought out mechanic, I think. Once again, you know what I noticed about this? Medicine has just become a way more important skill than it currently is.
Yep.
And to me, that's huge because you don't get a lot of that. You use it to stabilize people, right?
You be using it to suture wounds properly. Otherwise, you end up with that.
With festering wounds, yeah.
And at the bottom, that just makes that worse.
And Ghostlight in chat says he actually uses the Grievous Wound table from the Grim Hollow campaign.
Grim Hollow, oh my gosh, yes. That's a great book and great rule set for the Grievous Wounds. That's definitely one that I really like too. We need to cover that. I don't know why I haven't.
I don't know.
There's too many things in the world to cover. So the other thing that I really like is they give options for like wounds and stuff and scars that affect others' attitude towards you, which is really, really cool. When you start to get all hideous and nasty, swine or wenches are going to really look your way at all.
Yeah. And actually, remember when we did like a skill challenge in the past? Speaking of using medicine skills, I actually I want skill challenge where actually getting injured matters, and just casting cures not gonna help you. you were in that challenge, right?
I don't remember.
Basically, like a VIP got hit with a poison arrow, but the arrow had enchantments on it that reacts violently to magic.
Yes, I do remember that skill challenge. That was really well done. You wrote that one, right?
Yeah.
It was really, Of course, that's why he's like, yeah.
It's like I just didn't want cure wounds just to solve an injury for once.
and that's a really good point. So they touch on healing here, which I think is really cool. We mentioned medicine skill becoming more valuable. So does the healer's kit in the herbalist kit, and they've added a surgeon's kit, which is really cool. And they come with a variety of tools to healing hit points, to closing wounds, to removing festering wounds, resuscitating. This is interesting. So to resuscitate, it requires a use of the healer's kit to attempt to stabilize and return a creature to life despite clinical quote-unquote death, which is awesome. Now, the DC is ridiculous. So the DC check for this is a DC 30 -5 for each successful death save the creature had before dying. So
Wow.
that's really intriguing. So the more their body fights off death and staves it off, the easier it is to resuscitate them. And I think that's cool as hell.
I just like the fact that they touched on the herbalist and the healer's kit, because when you look in the books, there's no real
Nothing.
description for them. You're like, hey, you have a kit. How does it work? I don't know. Figure it
Yeah.
out.
And they're there, and I feel like they're decent at load levels, but they just stop being effective.
I
not
think,
very long.
in my
afterwards.
opinion, the healer feat is what the healer kit should do on its own.
Yeah, agreed.
But that's just Justin's opinion, and apparently Ian's too. So, and of course, there's diseases and rules for taking care of characters who are injured during long rests, which I think is cool. Attrition and death is another one that talks about lingering conditions and new conditions in combat. Bloodied is one I am super familiar with, and I love it, and I have gradually been adding it more and more to my monsters. If you don't know, that was a 4th edition mechanic that signified when a monster or character hit half hit points of their maximum. Generally, some powers could be used, some spells, some features would trigger, and it was a very nice feature.
I like Bloodied. That was fun.
But then once again, in the context of what hit points represents in 5th edition, it makes less sense than it did in other early 4th edition at least. So,
or at least it functions in a different way.
Yes. So they also give you some other conditions like beaten. When you're below a quarter of your max hit points, you are beaten. Your body is a mess and bleeding, open wounds, cracked, are splintered bones, or much worse. You experience severe pain simply by moving. So, when you become beaten for the first time in combat and you have 2 or fewer levels of exhaustion, you gain a level of exhaustion. You gain a level of exhaustion for dropping below
oh my god,
a quarter of your hit points.
And I got to admit, that does actually make sense.
That is savage as hell. Oh,
it says
man.
If you have 2 or fewer, you gain 1. So it looks like it's not.
It does stop at 2, yeah.
2, yeah.
But still, 2 levels, that's what is that, half movement and disadvantage on ability checks?
It's not good.
Which is just savage. Which is part of the challenge, right?
Yep. I mean, look at exhaustion.
So they do talk about stabilizing characters, and there's a variety of different rules that I think are pretty cool. They also have what's called that Death's Door option. So the more dramatic and engaging encounters with death, the DM may allow this variant rule, which allows you to float around a little longer, I guess, which is interesting. How about expanded exhaustion?
Ooh.
This is something I feel like every DM has been asking for.
Now this is something that Justin needs to be looking at.
What?
You love exhaustion?
I do, but I like how it works as is. I'm one of the few, I think. Because people say that it's too punishing, right?
Yep.
And so...
Yep, and for the record, 2 levels of exhaustion, 1 disadvantage on ability checks, 2 speed halved.
It is, okay. So, for this one, they slow it down. So now at 1 level, you have disadvantage on strength and dex ability checks only, so it doesn't affect your investigation or your persuasion or anything like that. At 2nd level, it's disadvantage. Your speed is halved, and anyone can tell you're tired with a DC 10 wisdom. So that's basically the same there, except for now they're giving you rules that, man, you're looking really tired. It's very clear. And it continues to go up between soft exhaustion, and it gives you DCs that the character can ignore it, which is where that high con comes into benefit again, which is really, really cool. What they added that I think is really cool is mental exhaustion. And this can come from just studying and deciphering and problem solving, which is sweet as hell. That's not something I've never considered. Have you?
No, not at all. Whenever I think of exhaustion in D&D, I think of physical actions. Like, oh, you've been walking for 2 weeks straight. You got it. You're gonna drop to the ground.
Also, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure half of the time when I got exhaustion with my barbarian was because he was an alcoholic.
But thinking of exhaustion, if you have a wizard who's sitting there trying to decipher the door you were talking about, and he's spending hours on it, he's just like, okay, you gain 1 level mental exhaustion. because you've been staring at this for so long and your brain's been overactive.
Yeah. And so they expanded on the conditions as well. Not only did they alter some of the existing ones.
Oh, they added grappled.
Grappled was already a condition.
More to it.
But they expanded on it, and that's important. Because they do that for almost all of them. But they added new ones, and some of them are really cool. I love the pin condition, which is for people who want to do what?
Well,
knock people to the ground, and
Just
instead of it being just knocked prone, there's now a new condition called pin, which is really, really cool. Which means it brings some of the older style play and also opens up coup de grace, so which is nice. Do any of these sound interesting to you guys?
shaken, nauseated.
Not stirred.
Horrifying sight or powerful enemy to add. That's really neat.
The nauseated is pretty cool. How about who doesn't want to vomit in the middle of battle? Dazed, that was something that was really popular in 4th edition.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling like there's a lot of stuff that was brought in from 4th edition because it was a little more tactical in combat-wise. Dazed creatures can't take reactions and may use either an action or a bonus action. So in Capes and Crooks, I did something like this, but it was shocked. So if you were struck by lightning spells, you had a chance to be shocked, and it did the same thing. Pain racked. That's a big one. There's a lot of detail into that that I just think really requires a lot of rules. I would say if there's one downside that I have to all this, it's that there's certainly more required memorization of what stuff does, which I guess is how it was with some of the other editions. There's so many rules that it's easy to forget what they do and spend time, looking them up. Rest and recovery. They added something that I love. Brandon, would you tell us about the breather?
Breather. Taking a breather is a short period of rest, at least 5 minutes long, after a strenuous activity. During that time, you may rest, shake your thirst and hunger, or check on a single wound and bandage it. During a breather, you may spend 1 hit die for healing or removing a wound. If a hit die is spent to heal, you roll the die and add your Constitution modifier to it. You regain hit points equal to the total.
Think about that.
Oh.
So in opportunities where they can't take a short rest or a long rest, they can take short breathers, right? Leading up. So you can go through multiple encounters with a breather in between, spending hit dice to heal yourself or tending to your wounds to remove the wounds, which is just really, really cool. It's not nearly as strong as a short rest or a long rest, but it can be 1 extra hit die of hit points can be the difference between somebody going down in the next encounter. Yeah. And so it's great for chain encounters, I think. What do you think about that, Ian? If you're not, he's typing a book over here, so.
And they added 1 after long rest.
Yep, you have a full rest. So, I don't know how I feel about this. It's basically 24 hours where you sleep at least 6 and you perform light activities, not non-strenuous details. But it helps you. I do like that they do include requiring rations or food. In one of the TikToks and YouTube videos I talked about long rest and short rest requiring a certain amount of sustenance to even gain the effects of. Some people really liked the idea, some people didn't. I totally was just playing Crown of the Magister, so I thought that was a cool mechanic, and they do include that a little bit here. But it's very in-depth in details, so you'll have to read through it yourself to get all the little details, because I realize we're really running out of time.
I mean, let's be real here. It is a 109-page document.
Yes,
there is a lot here.
Wow.
And there's no way we can touch on everything.
I do think it's cool. They did some really good expanding upon the combat options, which is nice. Once again, I see more of the 4th edition stuff, such as marking. Overrun and tumble, they basically took rules out of the DMG and altered and enhanced them, which is really cool. Disarming, I don't know how I feel about that because I don't think you need a rule for that. That to me should just be a contested check, but they make it a DC, it looks like here. I don't really know how I feel. I feel like, it does go into more detail, and if you want that nitty-gritty detail, then, that's going to work for you. I feel like that stuff's a little unnecessary, but I feel like that's what they're going for with this anyway. So this is interesting. Combat options. You get power attack is brought back, right? Before you make an attack, you can take a -5 penalty and then increase the damage, basically. And it's a same thing, but with finesse if you take a feint. Shove and trip and reach and polearm stuff, they have rules for that. The new condition, dominance, is pretty cool. When you have advantage on your attack rolls against a target and the target doesn't have the same benefit against you, or a hostile creature that attacks you has disadvantage to its attack rolls and you don't suffer the same penalty, this condition is called dominance. You can also benefit from dominance if your target is standing on difficult terrain. Basically, it gives you a increased range of like critical strikes, as far as I can understand it, and additional options that you can do as long as you have dominance, which basically is, don't do it, Anakin!
I was just thinking I have the higher ground.
Yep.
So they give a mechanic for that, which is pretty cool. And they do what we kind of did with weapon perks, except they're not tied to weapons, just features. Staggering, you have a chance to slow somebody's movement by smashing them and then dropping them to prone. So there's a lot of these. Obviously, we can't cover all of them, as you can tell on the screen. The layout is really nice, too.
Yeah.
That's one thing I like about GM Binder. It does a really good job of making people who don't have necessarily the layout experience. Not saying that these guys don't, but it's a powerful tool for getting good-looking stuff without really knowing what you're doing.
I mean, if you told somebody this was a published document by, like, a professional publisher, I believe you.
Yes, yeah. So,
and that's a compliment.
I like the art.
For sure.
It's all very consistent.
Yes.
It is worth noting that I don't know they got permission to use some of this art. I saw links to everything in the beginning, but it is a free product that's, fan-made. The stuff they did with stealth is pretty cool. They give some rules for, like, gagging people and chokeholds, which is really cool.
Silent takedown.
So the silent takedown, taking immobilizing and incapacitating a target without actually having to attack them outright, which is very cool.
You can make Batman.
You can make Batman. So this is really cool. They give you a nice little grid based on Theater of the Mind games.
Oh, they brought back Charge.
They did. They did a couple different things.
Yep.
And this is pretty cool. I think it's really nice. We're not going to spend much time in it, but it basically gives you kind of a rock, paper, scissors theme.
Mm-hmm.
So you get dash actions over wins over somebody that's using an intercept reaction, and then that wins over somebody that takes the engage action, and that wins over somebody that takes the dash. It's a whole rock and paper scissors thing, which is really cool.
Yeah. All right, it's about like 7:38 right now. So
is it really?
Yeah.
Holy shit! All right,
let's jump back to the index briefly. Give like a quick scroll through so this can like glance on it again.
Yep, and you can pick this up. We have a link to it on our website at critacademy.com.
Lower, next page.
Next page. That's all the artwork. Yeah, see, so like I see Guild Wars 2 artwork in there. So
yeah.
Fan created. No rules apply apparently.
Siege weapons.
So they give all kinds of different details. They do have character options, which I think is cool. They added sub skills, which expands on the skill sets, kind of like the race and sub races, which is really dope.
Inventory slots.
Not sure how I feel about that. But the way I understand it, and I think this is the one, if I click it, it talks about having belt pockets, and I think some items that are quote unquote prepared can be used as like a free action as opposed to like a potion requiring an action to drink or something. If it's in your belt pouch, it's free, I guess, or a bonus. I'm not sure.
It kind of makes sense. I mean, if it's right there, it's ready to go instead of reaching into your backpack to grab it.
Realistic encumbrance, get that shit out of my games. Yeah. Unless you're trying to carry a giant treasure chest, I'm not worried about it. But some people like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I pretty much tell my players, as long as you're not trying to do something ridiculous, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Some people don't feel that. But there's obviously a lot of options here. And they do give rules if you decide to run a more high magic. But this is definitely designed for a low magic game. So keep that in mind. And if you do decide you want to run something deadly like this, with all these different rules, make sure you give the book to your players in advance and talk about what you're going to do and how you're going to run it, because not everyone's going to be in and on top of that and enjoying it. So with that, I think that'll do it for our main topic today. This is Grit and Glory. An advanced player's guide to combat, I think is what it says. Extra rules a dungeon master needs for running gritty and realistic adventures with the world's greatest role-playing game. So